Welcome to Exotica. My name's Randy Moggins. My guest today is Duncan O'Finioan. He is returning to the microphone of Exotica as a result of a weekend conversation that he and I had together. And we're going to open up the conversation talking about two particular figures that are prominent on the internet right now. The first is Benjamin Fulford, the former Forbes magazine Eastern Rim correspondent located in Japan. Fulford has been on the internet in videos confronting David Rockefeller and also a guest on the Jeff French show from time to time, and claims to have a lot of insider knowledge as to the workings of the global elite powers in the Pacific Rim, both in Japan and China, as well as other Eastern Rim countries. We move that conversation over into about another so-called informer, an insider named Charles, who was interviewed on early January by Bill Ryan at Project Avalon. Charles claims that he worked inside as I guess you would call him a problem solver or a fixer for the elite 33 families he claims run the world, and in a wide-ranging video interview with Ryan presented a lot of information allegedly coming from the inside. Charles later showed up as well, posting onto the Project Avalon forums, and he has at various times appeared and disappeared, and Duncan's going to talk more about that. This interview is going to go in a lot of different directions. It has to do with a mission that Duncan O'Finioan has taken up. Earlier this year, Duncan was called before a council that included the ruling families of the world that he's connected with, the three families. The families he talks about in this interview are the two ruling families who are warring, and a third faction who are attempting to keep peace in the world and offset the damages by the warring elite families. He reveals a lot about the spiritual nature of these ruling families and the fact that this is a very ancient battle that is now playing out. Earth is the battlefield, and the population of Earth is a prize. You can agree or disagree with the information that's presented here, but I think if you listen very carefully, you're going to find there's information revealed, and some of it is very dark, some of it is very intriguing, and some of it is designed to bring you up to speed and also to prepare you for the battles that are ahead. We are in a war on planet Earth, and it is a war that is being staged on a spiritual level. So you're going to have to be armed in a way that you've probably not understood until now. We're going to begin with this interview, open up the questioning that I posed to Duncan regarding Benjamin Fulford, and then we will move to the Charles conversation and go from there. This is Exotic. I'm Randy Moggins, and I welcome Duncan O'Finioan.
So I don't know, you were asking me about Fulford.
Yeah, let's start with Fulford.
Honestly, I don't know very much about him. I've never listened to anything he's had to say. I've read some excerpts here and there of some of the things he says. He comes across to me as kind of like Charles.
Yeah.
Third cousin twice removed from somewhere that has a little bit of information, not enough to make him dangerous to anyone but himself, and it's just sprouting off a lot of crap.
Well, Fulford claims he's got this, and this guy was actually a journalist, the Pacific Rim correspondent for Forbes magazine, and he's on a video online talking to David Rockefeller. Apparently,
yeah, I've heard about that.
Video camera in a hotel room with Rockefeller. Now, I don't know. This stuff's hard to fake. I don't think he's faking it. I'm just trying to figure out, you go from Forbes magazine to basically doing looks like a two-toed standoff with the New World Order, and I'm thinking, what the hell's going on with this? Because, look, you know as well as I do, if they want to toast you, they're going to toast you.
Yeah.
Maybe you... I mean, you're nimble. Yeah, I mean, you're nimble enough. You've had to maneuver around this stuff, but you have the training. This guy does not look to me like he's got the ability to sidestep him. Now, there's a whole story about apparently some Eastern Sonic group that came in and made him a deal, and he didn't take it. And again, I'm not so sure about that either. The quality of his information looks to me like he's really active out there. I mean, I got a couple of things I want to ask you, and you brought up one of them, and we might as well just go there. This thing with Charles.
This is one of the things that I told somebody privately not too long ago about Charles. Charles isn't exactly what he claims to be, but he is a little bit more than most people think he is. Now, I'm not exactly sure if this is the guy. Of course, Charles is not his real name anyhow.
Right.
But I'm not exactly sure if this is the same guy that I met like 20 years ago or longer, when I was still pretty active and we were both much younger. Just looking at the back of this guy's bald head, it's kind of hard to tell, If it is, and it does sound like him, he's a thug. And it's exactly what I wrote. He's the equivalent of a mafia fixer. He has his own guys that work under him. The big boys call him, say, we have a problem. This guy is a problem. Yeah, take your boys and fix the problem. Make him see our way, or go collect 500 yards from the guy down on the dock or something like that. That's what Charles is.
Yeah, but that's a few clicks away from what he claims in his interview with Bill Ryan as having been in the room with what he calls the 33.
It's possible he could have been.
Okay.
I'm not gonna say that he wasn't, because I've known guys that have been in rooms, quite honestly, with mafia bosses where they're counting out millions. But that still doesn't mean that they're privy to all the inside information. I think Charles is being used. I think he's paying off a debt, possibly. But what I find interesting is someone on what's Ryan's forum?
Project Avalon.
Avalon.
Yeah.
I never even thought about it. Somebody took a calendar and looked it up. Charles basically disappears once I say something about it. Mm-hmm. I didn't really even see that until yesterday.
So I'm trying to get to the bottom of what I think is a pretty deep well of disinfo. And that's an extensive interview that Bill Ryan does. And I mean, look, I know you like Bill Ryan and Kerry Cassidy, and I have great respect for the work they've done. Nobody's above getting snookered in this deal, because basically you take the whistleblowers and the people that they interview and the quality of information, you got to pan for it, because for a lot of reasons there is information there that may not even be deliberate disinfo, but is simply either memories that are sketchy, which, you understand real clearly, and so do I, or it's planted information that's been seeded out as kind of a thread to throw people off, or to keep them kind of enthralled with this kind of, ooh, this is pretty neat kind of information.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, hell yeah. And it keeps the left hand from knowing what the right hand is doing, and being that you've got more than one group, it's like I said last night, you have two main groups out there. It was one family generations ago, and then they split up, and you got two families, and they use all these other families to do their dirty work for them. The Rockefellers, Carnegies, et cetera, what they call the 33 and all that. That's why, you hear people talking now that the Illuminati is, fighting amongst themselves. They always have been, and you got these two big boys out there, the two big groups, using everybody, and we're right in the freaking middle of it.
You put out on the blog post about the fact that there were two and then there were three, and you sort of alluded to the fact that these are bloodlines, and that the third group is actually something that you yourself are a part of.
Yeah, that was something that kind of surprised me a few months ago too. The third group, I've said this years ago on an interview. Honest to God, don't remember when and where, about there being three groups. And you have Group A, B, and C. A and C are fighting against each other, and you get Group B that's kind of acting like a referee to make sure that neither side stays within the rules of conflict. And that's the people that I deal with, is Group B. It keeps everything within the rules of conflict.
So are any of these people good guys? Are there neutral parties? Or is this just like one side playing off against the other, and the rest of us are sitting in the middle, watching the spit fly?
I don't think Group B is, well, we'll call them Group B, just alphabet soup, right?
Yeah.
No, they're not. I mean, the people that I deal with, this is when I was literally hauled into the carpet, okay, and said, look, you got to make a choice. Mm-hmm. You got to make a decision right now, who you're going to stand with. And I stood there in front of the group, this council, and I said, I stand on the side of the human race. It made a lot of people happy that night. And Group B, the one that I belong to now, is doing everything it can to minimize the damage between the war of the the two other sides. You know, Group B has no, as far as I know, as far as I've encountered, as far as I've weeded through, have no needing, wanting, or anything to control, rule anybody. Just minimize the damage, because what is controlling all this is so far beyond the rest of us. I mean, you're talking the biblical, spiritual, cosmic, the whole, you know, I don't even try to go there. You know, all I know is I got a fight in front of me. I've got a battle plan that was given to me, and I've got rules of conduct I have to follow, and I try to stick to it and do the best I can.
I don't ever want you to compromise yourself, and I know you won't, but what's the theater of war? Where are we looking at for what's going to be the next eruption? What's it going to be?
Well, it's kind of what I was trying to allude to last night. You know, planetary alignment, galactic, you know, that's all very real. I mean, these New Agers and whatnot try to make it out to be so much more than what it really is. You know, we're going to ascend in 2012, blah, blah, blah. Bullshit. These guys are going to be right here with the rest of us. You know, that ain't going to happen, okay? And like I said last night, you can't stop Earth changes. You know, how do you stop 2 or 3 10-point earthquakes around the globe at one time? You can't stop it. And the problem is both sides, A and C, have technology to cause quakes, to magnify quakes and storms and everything, you know, right on through. And they're not above using them. You know, I say they have used them. That's breaking the rules. They're not supposed to. And when they get caught breaking the rules, then there are consequences, i.e. Charles disappearing. They broke the rules. That's when I was after I was actually brought in. They came after my butt. They broke the rules of engagement.
So where in the scheme of things do you think Charles sits in this? I mean, he claims that after he did the Project Avalon interview, he was basically hauled off somewhere and held and then escaped, apparently at, you know, the very threat of life, and somehow got back out and reconnected on the Project Avalon forum and was posting there for a while under another name until he outed himself or somebody outed him. I'm just mystified as to where does the information thread lead, because what he brought out in that interview was not really new material. I think anybody that's followed the alternative media, and I have to call it that just because, you know, it's the alternative to what's being mass-fed everybody else. There wasn't a lot of news there.
No, and that's, quite frankly, that's what really bothered me about it from day one, is that there's nothing, you know, I actually listened. It's one of the only interviews of some I've ever listened to. And I sit there and listen to this guy. I'm not hearing anything new, dude. This is all old hat here. I mean, I sit here for an hour and a half, 2 hours, whatnot, listening for something new, something different.
The allure seemed to be that somehow he was willing to engage, and at what level I'm still not clear, because, well, again, we don't have a whole lot of news. He made one statement that made me sit up and go, wait a minute, and that was where he claimed that the nuclear option was removed from the table, which I don't believe.
No, I still maintain that I still look for a limited nuclear exchange. I don't believe there's going to be an all-out thermonuclear war. I don't think so. But limited exchange, you know, like the small...
Yeah, suitcase nukes.
Suitcase nukes, or they can put them on the Minuteman missiles and launch them like across the state, something like that. I still see some crap hitting the ground like that. I've always thought that. So,
I guess where I want to go with this is, I think we agree on the Charles thing, that it's really a non-starter, and I'm not so sure why people have spent... I looked at the Project Avalon thread, which I do every couple days, and it still rages on. It's kind of like people were fascinated by this. And I'm thinking, you guys are sitting there, you're just chucking wood into the water right now because there's nothing here. And this seems to me to be kind of like the thing that's going on with the internet right now. I mean, I got to say that at least on your blog, you and Axe have been releasing information in a kind of controlled manner, just dropping little things out there and giving people something to think about. And you talked a lot on the blog about survival and preparedness. What is the message you would want to have people hear you say about being prepared? And this is kind of like, and I think we've talked about this before, it's beyond obviously stockpiling freeze-dried food and ammo and all the other things which you may or may not do.
The best thing that I've always said is try to have yourself to where you can be mobile, either by automobile, on foot, because what I keep seeing is where you're at may be safe today and sinking into the ground tomorrow. I advise bug-out bags, something that you can carry, backpack, a rucksack, whatever, something that you and every member of your family can carry comfortably. I mean, not where you're weighted down to where quarter mile and you're dead on your feet.
Yeah, we call this a 72-hour pack. We have them here. Every member of the family has one. And,
some of us actually are being accused of fear-mongering and whatnot. Okay, maybe. I would rather scare the crap out of you right now. Let you think about it, deal with it, get over it, push through it, and get ready. So that when the crap does hit the fan, then you don't have to deal with it. So you don't freeze up if you got to move.
Well, I fail to see how it's fear-mongering when, if this information was processed by people in Japan, given what happened just a little over a week ago, the people there close, especially those close to those ridiculous power plants, would have had a 72-hour pack, a bug-out bag, whatever you want to call it. Yes. You're in much better shape. Look, it's always been a dangerous world. It's always been a world of survival. I think civilization so dumbed us down at this point that most people think that they live in a safe world. And I'm like, are you kidding me?
God, that's so dead on. I read something a couple of weeks ago where these people were talking about white hats, dark hats, all this kind of stuff. Talking about, we've got the Illuminati's back against the wall, and now they're ready to make deals. They know they're going down. I'm thinking, are we living in the same world? Really? You got earthquakes here, people, countries being bombed out of existence here. You got all this stuff going on over here. I think, are we living in the same world? Are we seeing the same thing? We ain't got nobody on the run.
I don't know if people are really paying attention to what's going on here. The magnetic poles are moving. They, for instance, you probably heard this, it's just the poster story for the whole thing. The one airport in Dade County, Florida, had to remap their landing strips for jets coming in because the magnetic north had moved enough that the jets no longer lined up their transponders correctly with the runway, which is...
Yeah, I know, and we've got all these things that are hitting now, and that's what I was saying last night. All this stuff with earth changes, the quakes, the storms, and the little regional wars in the Middle East and different countries, it's going to increase so exponentially over the next couple of 3-4 years that, you're going to wake up in the morning, it's like, I don't want to get up because, what's next? What's today? Day before yesterday, we had 2 9.0 earthquakes. Mm-hmm. The day before that, we took a bomb in the backyard, and what's today?
Well, I looked on the maps today, and 4.2 off of California, and a whole bunch of quakes out in the Ring of Fire. Which, this Ring of Fire thing, I don't think they understand how the tectonic plates work and what's happening. And you talked about this as well in your blog post, the stress, how much stress the Earth is going through.
Right. And did you also see, we're just north of Phoenix, Arizona?
Yeah.
A quake yesterday?
Yes.
Those are almost unheard of.
Yeah. So we've got major seismic activity going on the West Coast. Look, even conservative mainstream geologists have been saying that the West Coast is long overdue for a major quake. I mean, I have friends out there, people I really love, and I'm talking to them on the phone. They're saying, man, the ground's rattling, and we know that there's something coming. And then, of course, this Japan quake had the potential, theoretically, to generate enough of a tsunami to hit Hawaii and possibly even Southern California. And I think that's actually what we're seeing in the activity that's going on now.
Right. Yeah, we were driving on Route 1 heading south from San Francisco to L.A. that day. That quake hit that morning. I hit San Francisco early that morning. Yeah, we were watching the surf, boy. I wanted to suit up and get the board and get out there, but
major waves going on with that.
Yeah, well, they had most of the beaches closed, so that was an impossibility. But in these families, like I said last night, these two families will use the earth changes to their advantage, and it's almost like this is the beatdown. This is the beatdown for the human race. You get some guy in the corner and you pound on him, you pound on him, you pound on him, and then you step back and say, "You have enough." If he says no, you get on there, you pound on him some more. And that's kind of what's going on right now, and they're just using all the herb changes to try to, beat everybody down. And then when everybody's like, we've had enough, one side of the family, or maybe both sides, steps up and says, we have the solution, okay? We can fix everything. We have food, water, we can save all of you, blah, blah, blah. All you got to do is give your heart, mind, soul, and your sovereignty. No thanks.
And that really is the battle that you're looking at right now, isn't it?
That is the battle. It comes down to, I have to go back many, many, many years ago. Malachi Martin made a comment once. Mm-hmm. He was asked that, so much of the religious aspect of it, of good versus evil and whatnot, doesn't make a lot of sense when you look at it in just what we know in general terms. And the guy was absolutely correct. And what Martin had said, in response to that was what most people don't know or understand, and they, meaning the higher echelons and most of the higher churches, don't want everybody to know, is that when it comes down to the end, we're talking about the 1,000-year reign, it depends on which side has the most souls. So in biblical terms, it isn't necessarily 1,000-year reign of Christ, which is Christ. In the way I look at it, is the good side, one of the good sides. Mm-hmm. It could be the other side if their number is higher.
That's really interesting. I never saw that before. But the thing about Malachi Martin was, he was an insider to the Vatican. And I mean, we'll just be real about the Vatican here, folks. If you're Catholic, sorry, but...
I was. I'm not sorry.
That's Martin knew where the bodies were buried. He understood the power game that went on inside the power structure that's the Vatican. And I mean, honestly, there's power structures around the earth. You know this, Duncan, that there are different capitals around the world that are power centrals. London is one. Clearly, D.C. is one. The Vatican's another one, and I believe Jerusalem as well. And it's interesting what you just brought up here is that we're in kind of like, this really is kind of like, to steal Brzezinski's term, this is the grand chessboard.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And some of us are the pawns and some of us are the prize. That's what I was trying to bring out last night delicately and as gently as I could. We're the prize, and which side gets to take control in the end. A little interesting tidbit about Malachi Martin. I was in touch with his publicist before he died, and she was setting up a meeting between us that I spoke with the publicist a couple of times, and she had related that he was extremely interested in talking to me and meeting, and I had a trip planned to drive up. I lived in Delaware, so they drive for me, and that's when I get the call that he had died. Oh man, so close.
Yeah, he did not die what you would call a timely death. There's questions about that as well. I know. Do you know who William Kennedy is?
I know the name, yeah.
Yeah, William Kennedy's done a lot of work on the occult over the years. He basically covered the Boston Diocese pedophile scandals that broke out. And Kennedy knew Malachi Martin, and I believe that Kennedy also knew that Malachi Martin was in the gun sights of the power elite as well, because Martin clearly knew a lot more about what was going on in Rome, whereas Kennedy was kind of focused in the Boston Diocese, which is that's a big stronghold there in the United States.
Right.
So that's interesting. That, boy, what a conversation that would have been, huh?
I wish that could have taken place. And what a lot of people don't know is that Malachi was advisor to 4 popes. He left the Jesuit order. He asked to be relieved of his duties and vows to the Jesuit order, not of his priestly orders. Because as he said, he still prayed Mass every day, But the reason that he did that is it was right after Karl Wojtyła, John Paul II, was elected Pope. You brought up the whole pedophile thing. He and a couple of others went to the new Pope and said, listen, this is the most serious problem the church has right now. It's got to be done. These guys have got to be gotten rid of. They've got to be held accountable, da-da-da. And what I was told is that the then Pope said, they won't listen to me, it's just carry on. And so Malachi Martin said, I'm done. So basically he said, I can't abide by this.
You think Martin was aware, I'm sure he was, the presence of the Black Pope and the fact that the Pope that we see is a figurehead, much like the President of the United States is a figurehead, that there's an actual background power structure, as with all things, because this is how they all work, and that the Black Pope sits in the background and basically he's the hidden hand that guides everything else.
That's just like, I've said it before, we haven't had a duly elected president since at least Abraham Lincoln.
No.
If even that near. Could go all the way back to Andrew Johnson.
Yeah, I suspect that's probably true as well, and yet I think a couple of men along the way stood up. I think Kennedy stood up. I think, Kennedy didn't come from some lily-white background either, but I kind of suspect at some point he attempted to redress some things that he saw were really wrong and on a number of levels, and he got taken out as well. And
yeah, I agree with that.
The control mechanism with chief executives has largely been, you get three choices now as a president. You toe the line, or A, you get Kennedy, B, you get Nixon, or C, you get Clinton. You can have your choice. Clinton's walking wounded, and he's basically now just this pathetic-looking troll that they bring out in order to parrot the company line. Nixon was cut off at the knees but allowed to live, and, Kennedy took the headshot. They did not allow him to live. And it doesn't matter how they do it. Really, when you look at it, and this was the other thing I wanted to ask you, because reading what Axe was posting about mind control, talking about these lasers, these highly tuned lasers, and the article that she wrote about. And, for those of you who are listening to this interview, you can go to Duncan's blog. It's duncano'finian.wordpress.com or duncano'finian.com and go to the blog. Read these articles, and there are things between the lines of these articles that I think are messages that if you have eyes to see and ears to hear, you're going to be able to pick up some information. Axe is talking about, mind control. And it's funny because I read this and I went, what she's really saying is this. We're all subjected to mind control. We're all being subjected on one level or another on a daily basis to trauma-based mind control. They're doing it through the media. They're doing it through the events they play out. They don't really have to chip us, do they?
No, they don't. No. Again, I thought that the chip was at that time, and still now, this may be something future into the future, but as of right now, it's a non-event. Again, it goes back to don't let the left hand know what the right hand is doing. So you get everybody so concerned with their chip, the company, and who's doing it, and who's going to be doing it, and all this and that, and people kind of forget about, laser-based technology. My God, you can shoot a laser from a satellite, widen that thing out, and cover miles, and subject everyone to the exact same from machine to brain commands. Kind of like some of the these sci-fi movies where we've got whole neighborhoods walking around zombified, with the drool coming out and the blood coming out and all that. Hell, they can do that now.
Voice-to-skull technology.
Yeah.
Which is basically, that's a very old ploy that was used on you, among others, in the MK Ultra projects. And
right.
I think people who have, been experiencers or abductees know as well that this is a technology that the ETs have employed as well. Yeah. By seeing that news article talking about it, it's like, okay, that means this is so obsolete now it doesn't matter if everybody does know about it. For years I've kind of made this statement because religion is obviously a tool of the New World Order as well, and I came out of evangelical Christianity, and they always talked about the mark of the beast, and they'd go, well, it's a barcode, and they're going to put it in your hand, or it's going to be a microchip, and they're going to stick it in your brain. I never really bought that I never really thought it was necessary. And again, there's all this veiled language and imagery that's obviously not just in the Bible, but in all the ancient texts as well, that alludes to a lot of things that people on the surface don't understand. And I think you'd agree with me that there's something far more insidious, that's a demarcation, and that is the spiritual battle that really are talking about on planet Earth. It's this whole spiritual war that we're in.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're also right about the so-called mark. You know, I, like you, even from the time I was a teenager and going on, I would hear people talk about it'll be a tattoo, it'll be a brand, you know, like with an actual branding iron, and then the years go by, well, it's going to be a chip, some kind of implant, et cetera, et cetera. You know, I'm like you know, physically, it might be something, but it's more of that internal brand than anything else. You know, it's what you decide to do with your free will. And this is something that Axe and I have talked about and we've discussed over and over, and we're trying to find the best way to put it into words. They cannot take away your free will. You have to give it up freely. However, they can daggone sure circumnavigate that by lies, falsehoods, false images, promises. Well, we're still working on the best way to explain this. And there are cosmic rules and laws about this. This is what, you know, Group B tries to oversee to a certain degree as well.
You know,
okay.
I find that so interesting what you just said. And for the listener, you can go listen to the interviews that Duncan's done online, the ones that we did with him. Coming from you who were subjected to what I consider to be just horrific trauma-based torture, call it what it is, and to survive what you survived and to go through all the years that you did of running the missions and living the kind of life that you did, you just told me basically that they never broke you, that they never broke your free will, and that in fact at some point you made a choice.
Yeah. With most of the people that were in my group, what they did is, basically I didn't submit. I didn't say make it stop. I wanted to die. I told them, just let me die. I'm not turning myself over, just let me die. And they ran an end run around that. And when I said that, they, you know, turned the dials up as high as it would go. And basically that's right when the personality split happened. So I never gave in to them. Mm-hmm. So the mean personality, not mean, but the mean person, me, never gave up my free will. I never gave up my control. And I think that is part and parcel for the reason that over the past several years, the three distinct personalities have been merging together into one. If you and I have had this conversation we're having right now 5 years ago, this will be an entirely different conversation. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't have even sounded this way. I would not have been this relaxed. I would not have had a lot of the knowledge about some things that I have right now. That's all comes from the merging of three distinct personalities. And I didn't have a choice. When you have three personalities fighting for control, each one wanting to be dominant over the other, your psyche, and you can't handle it, okay? You either go insane, you jump off a bridge, or you just lay down and don't get up. And I just sat down one day after talking to a couple of people who knew a lot more about this than I did, and it sounded kind of funny, you know? You're sitting there talking to yourself, you know? It's like, look, guys, you know, let's work this out, okay? Because if this corporal dies, we all three go by, you know? Neither one of us get to do anything. So let's work something out here, okay? And that's where we started.
Duncan, are the personalities merging to the point now where the skill sets of the different personalities are integrating into you as well? Because you have basically Duncan, as we're talking to right now, then you have what you call your beast personality, which is the warrior. And you also have a personality that is possessed with a great deal of intellectual knowledge. Are those skills kind of coming together in one place for you?
That was a sinister laugh. Somewhat, yeah. And that's all I'll say right now.
Because I got to tell you that, that's formidable. You're not only just talking about the skills of a super warrior, but you're talking about intellect, and now you're talking also about something that I hear in your voice, and I hear it more in this conversation than the one that we had, I think, 6 months ago. And that's the spiritual personality that's coming out, the one that's kind of the oversoul, Duncan, that's going to the way of wisdom.
True, very true. And again, some of that actually comes from being dragged on the carpet. I mean, look, guys, when you got a limousine pulls up in your driveway and a French guy gets out, a black French guy gets out, hands you a piece of paper that has your godmother's signature on it and says your presence is required now, get in the car. You're like, oh boy, what do I do now? I don't want to do this. And it's not an option. That's not an option.
Explain, if you can, without, giving away the farm, your godmother, the relationship, and what this person means to you.
Liana. And I'm butchering her name, and I won't even try her last name. She's not from this country at all. She's high European. My first memory of her was about 4 years old. And her and some other people came to the house. And from what I understand and from some of the things I have been told recently, they knew what was going to happen to me with the project and whatnot. They were against it. They didn't want this to take place. And it took place anyway. And she would show up periodically, where I would be. And no, we're not talking about someone in a dream state or anything like that. This is, a real physical person. She means a lot to me. She's pulled my butt out of more than one fire where I was in some trouble here and there, and I should have been able to walk away from it. But she's one of these people that, with a phone call, lots of things can take place. She's just, God, I don't know how really to describe her. She's just someone, she's kind of like the great aunt that you see about once every 10 years. Mm-hmm. And every time you see them, they always look the same, and they seem to know everything about you, know things about you that, like, hey, where'd you get that skeleton out of my closet out? Well, I had it buried. She's like that. So her and some of the others in the group have always been a part of my life, but staying in the background, letting me make my own choices, my own decisions and stuff, up until just recently when they hauled my butt to the carpet and said, you got to make a decision. What are you going to do? Who are you going to fight? Where are you going to stand? You're good at running your mouth. Are you ready to back it up? I guess I better start backing it up, right?
Do you think that she's psychically connected to you somehow?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I've even caught myself, will say the same thing. She has caught me, instead of calling her my godmother, I've called her my grandmother. Mm-hmm. And that is a very distinct possibility. Understanding
that you recognize that obviously your bloodline played a big role in who you were and who you became, that you were selected, and that you were selected because your genetic disposition, which indicated that you had gifts they wanted to tap. Right. And, there's a possibility that if the people running the particular project that I was involved in as a child did a virtual just snatch and grab, they would have been in violation, and there would have been some serious consequences. But being that I was not old enough to have free will, and I was turned over by guardians with free will, that's what I was alluding to earlier. They find ways to circumnavigate free will. Exactly. They find ways to go around. A lot of the interviews that I do are with people who are abductees, and one of the patterns that I see, what I know to be true, is that somewhere along the line permission is given. It's either done directly by the person themselves or the person who has authority over them. Exactly. And in the United States, we know that, we can't prove it, but I think we know by knowing the permission was given many times for people to be taken for different projects, and maybe through the way it was done in your case, which was that they used your father, that your father had been compromised and that he was forced into a situation, which, goes back to the first interviews that we did together, or that there is even a higher authority, which goes back to the ET abductions that began in the 1950s and 60s, where the government itself basically signed off in order for subjects to be taken.
Yeah. Or what I think is some of both, actually. With the two groups, Group A and Group C, each one is playing their own game, and they pit each other, against each other. And as far as, everybody needs to understand, I hate the term super soldier. That's not what we were.
Yeah.
We were what was known as Omega units. We weren't called super soldiers or ultimate warriors or anything like that. We were just Omega units is what we were. My number was 197. I was Omega unit 197. That's who I was. But people in some of the media picked up on that term, the ultimate warrior, super soldier, and whatnot. But what I was going to say is that, both families, both sides did a lot of very similar, almost identical projects, and both sides had people like myself and Axe and others, and they would pit us against each other. I remember one situation where I went up against a Soviet, and this was back in the early 80s. I would have been maybe 20, 21. This guy was 3 times my size. I lost, and I'm not ashamed to say it. He whipped my butt, and I got dragged out on a freaking stretcher.
This was this a physical battle, a psi battle, or both? This
was more of a physical battle. It was on neutral ground, where we started at point A to point B, and it's kind of like, capture the flag.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a training exercise, with full contact is what it was. And I lost. I mean, this guy would trump me good. Where I was augmented in one arm and the legs and whatnot. I mean, this guy was just, imagine Schwarzenegger with steroids and implants. That's what this guy looked like. He was unbelievable. He was scary. He was frightening. And he never spoke. All he did was grunt.
Do you think he had so you never really had contact with him in terms of mental? I'm thinking more back to the story that you've relayed about what happened in Southeast Asia, and I'm thinking, is there a psi aspect to this? In other words, is there a psychological battle that's occurring as well?
Honestly, Axe and I go through that almost every night. We're having the block, shield, different groups do what's called psychic attacks. And if you don't believe them, go through one.
Oh, I believe it.
You will become a believer, I'm telling you.
Oh, yeah.
We both have woken with physical wounds and the physical marks from these attacks. And there's a lot there that I would love to go into with you, and we can do that at a later date once we figure out exactly how to try to explain.
Yeah.
We were actually talking about that last night. He had made the comment that there is this one aspect that we have not discussed, and we really need to. And you brought it up, my friend, so did you get the interview? How's that?
Well, the reason I bring it up is because I sense it's there. I know what it, look, in a different kind of way, I've been in a battlefield too, and I've woken up in the morning feeling like I've been through a meat grinder with no explanations at all. I've also, I'll tell you this story, I was on a plane flying from Chicago to Phoenix, oddly enough, and I got on the plane with a being that sat there and scanned me for 3.5-hour flight. Literally had to shut myself down because I could feel it. I mean, literally, physically, I could feel the top of my head heating up. I could feel something crawling through my mind. Creepiest thing in the world to have happen. And I don't know why that being was there, although I did find out when I got to Phoenix, and later when I went to Flagstaff and Sedona, I started to get a little more sense of it because I went there with a mission, and I started to understand that this was an assignment to basically take me out too.
Right.
And this is not grandstanding here. I have no idea what that means on one level, and on another level, I understand it perfectly. And it's like what you and Axe are going through. There's a lot of things that go on in the background that I don't think we have words for. It actually makes you sound delusional if you talk about it.
Yes, it does. Absolutely, it does. Case in point, I had a group started coming after me about a year ago. And this is a group that is very heavily into dark magic, and I mean, what they were coming at me with everything but the kitchen sink. I mean, when I'm sitting with a candle, a white candle burning, which I use as a nightlight, and it's also the best alarm system people like us can have, because when there's bad energy, bad mojo starts coming in, that candle flame shoots up.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there watching that candle flame shooting up almost a foot high out of the candle holder. I'm like, oh boy, here we go. And one thing led to another. Well, I won that night, and I started tracing these buggers back, and I got a go-between, an intermediary to sit, go-between conversation, try to find out what's going on. And I said, look, I have never done anything to these people. I don't even know these people. What's their beef with me? And what they sent back to me was that not yet, but you're a future threat. And I'm like, oh boy, okay, future threat. What's this? And I'll relate something that I know you're gonna understand this. About a month ago, this is the last time this has happened. About a month ago, I was in Walmart. So, no disrespect to Walmart people, okay? I mean...
No, save that for me. I've got plenty of disrespect for Walmart.
I've got a lot of complaints, but I just don't want to, kick off anybody that works for them and check them. When I see what we call a demonico, which is a human being who has given up their own free will and accepted a demonic entity to reside inside them. That's what it's called a demonico. It's a Greek word. Some of us can see them. When I see them, everything around me turns black and white. All color it's gone. It's like I'm totally colorblind. And I get this real nauseated feeling, real sick feeling to my stomach. And it's like things kind of slow down, and I start looking. I find it, I spot it, and normally, and always before, they'll see me, they'll take off the other direction. And give it a couple of minutes, everything goes right back to normal. Sometimes I have to go to the bathroom, throw up, sometimes I don't. This last time, it didn't happen that way. I'm pushing the cart through the center of the store. This happens, and I stop, and I'm looking for it, and I see it, and it's a middle-aged woman, and it looks at me. And again, remember, I'm not seeing a middle-aged woman. I'm seeing the face of a demonic. Yes. And it starts walking right towards this kid about 5 years old. I start walking towards the demonico, and I start saying, Exotic Spiritus Demonico, which essentially means get the F out, a little out of here. It looked at me and just slowly walked past me. No more fear. It wasn't afraid. That's how close I think we are to one major showdown.
Yeah, that actually mirrors my experience on the flight from Chicago to Phoenix, because I eyeballed a being, and I went, how in the hell did you ever get on a plane like that? Well, the answer is quite simple. What I saw wasn't probably what anybody else saw.
No,
but I saw a being that I can only describe as a hybrid, and it looked at me and I looked at it. The eyes were completely black, and there was a sense there that there's no soul here. This is something else. So I completely, it's creepy, and to even relate it to most people, they don't get it, but I understand it because you're right. Look, I think what you've been talking about is the fact that there's a rift that's opening up. I mean, there is a spiritual rift that's opening where we're coming into contact with something very dark, very supernatural, and extremely powerful.
Okay, I'm going to say something that we were saving for a blog post a couple of months from now. And you're right, when you said earlier that it seems like we're releasing some good information only slowly, we are. We are. Some of it is, I have to call somebody and say, okay, here's what I want to say. Does that check out? And they say yes, or they say, no, you can't say this yet. But you know what CERN is, right?
Yeah, I do. Hadron Collider?
Yes.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with any type of scientific experiment to create any kind of warp ship, space shuttle, or high energy, nothing. That's a doorway to the other side.
It's a portal that they've created.
That's breaking the rules. That's majorly breaking the rules. I'm going to get in trouble for this tonight. One side wants to bring an army through. Can you imagine an army of things that you can't kill any normal means? That's what they want to bring through.
I'm picturing it right now. Why would you think that they would put a statue of Shiva, the Destroyer of Worlds, in front of the CERN facility?
I
asked that rhetorically, but you know what I'm.
No, I know the answer. I know the answer. It's a symbol for one of the bloodlines.
Okay.
It's a symbol for one of the families.
This is the being that was invoked by Oppenheimer in talking about the dropping of the nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Correct.
And I don't understand how the world looks at these things and doesn't see the occult signatures. And it's interesting because you said it. It's bloodlines. This is the symbology. It's the trademark of the family.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And it's going to get a whole lot scarier. And one of the things that I know we have gotten a ton and a half of email from people wanting us to explain what we meant about seeing things, going to go through things that the human mind right now just cannot comprehend. This is part of it. Creatures that cannot be killed by normal means. It equates to the biblical ripping of the veil.
Yes, exactly what it is.
Okay. What we call it, actually I call it, the other side, we call it the never never, okay? And we actually took that from a friend of mine who's an author, Jim Butcher,
right?
Who offered the Dresden.
Yeah, and I got to thank you for that. You turned me on to Jim Butcher. I took Jim Butcher to the beach with me on vacation, and now I'm addicted. So he's making money off of you, dude.
I know, he's great, man. Jim is great, and we're actually, he doesn't want to admit it, but we're actually distantly related. Hey, Jim, I want my check. And
that's interesting.
But he termed it the never never in his novels, and actually I liked that, and we started using it, and people saying, why you call it the never never? I said, because you never want to be there, and you never want it to come here. But that's exactly what's going to happen. The never never and our physical world are going to coexist for a while. So if you're sitting around and you see long dead, Grandma Jelly Bean walking through your house and wants to talk to you, you probably really are seeing it, or a good facsimile of it. And I strongly suggest you don't carry on a communication with it.
It's funny you bring that up. I thought this years ago. The original movie Ghostbusters. I know you don't watch movies, but it was a film with Bill Murray, and it was painted as a comedy, but the truth of the matter is that this movie, which came out in the 1980s, I think, because this was my oldest son, this movie was painting entities walking around the streets of Manhattan, and people on a rooftop on Central Park West, conjuring energy forces from rooftops and bringing in beings that are basically named in the grimoires of ancient mythology. And I've watched this movie then. I missed some of it. I got a little bit of it. I saw it again recently, and I went, oh my God, they are really talking about something that is so dark, and they're entertaining children with this. And I'm thinking, this is really part of the media massaging us in a way to make it almost seem normal.
Exactly right. And I did actually see that movie. I did see Ghostbusters. And I'll tell you what, you're absolutely right with what you said, how dark that those parts really are. It puts Harry Potter to shame.
Yeah.
With the actual underlying tone and the underlying meaning. It really does. It puts the world of Harry Potter to shame, because they were actually using the correct pronunciations
of
the names.
Yes, which begs me to wonder what Harold Ramis and the people who wrote this movie are really, well, we know, don't we? We know what Hollywood's into, and we know
exactly right.
what they're doing in the entertainment realm. And I've commented repeatedly in recent months about the conditioning that's going on in the culture right now to accept the paranormal from a dark side. I accept the spiritual realm. I totally get that. I was flabbergasted when I watched the Super Bowl game and watched this commercial where they were doing the E.T. thing with the Mayan. They had a car abducted by a UFO which dropped it down into the middle of a Mayan pyramid. it was just unbelievable. In 30 seconds of images, they slipstreamed an entire whole paranormal theme right into the consciousness of the TV viewing public, and Super Bowl's huge. It's just, to me, it's just phenomenal what they're conditioning us to accept right now. So, and I mean, when you were talking about CERN, I had chills. I mean, the hair is starting to stand up on my arms and stuff, because I know where he's going with this.
Yeah, CERN is, no pun intended, CERN is the main concern right now. Let's just say that some of the so-called accidents where it gets taken offline for a couple of months at a time, they're not exactly accidents. If that thing, somebody out there is going to listen to this and say, well, why don't somebody just go in and blow it up? You can't. It would destroy 3/4 of Europe if you did that. You're talking about something that's tapping in
to another dimension.
Places, to other dimensions and places that it would be. I'm not stuttering. I'm trying to choose my words very carefully. You know, and like when we did the last interview, I could just run my mouth and say whatever I wanted. I can't do that anymore. I'm subjected to authority now, people. I'm not used to that. I'm trying to get used to it. It would be like a runaway react. If you tried to do something like it, it would open something up to where it would start drawing its energy through this side. Is the best way, the safest way I know to put it. Yeah,
it's dark energy, basically.
Yes.
It's very much what we can liken, if we can conceptualize it, to a black hole.
In essence, yeah. Well, that's partly. It's kind of like an energy that has a life of its own. It actually has intelligence, as it were. The energy
yeah. Well, energy is intelligence. This is the part that I don't think most people understand. I think you and Axe are grappling with this. This understanding that there's an intelligent energy pattern that exists, and it has different polarities, which is why you have two warring families, because you have basically an alignment of two polarities, and it's the Great War. Human beings were not designed for this level of energy, or even our bodies clearly aren't. Our soul level isn't designed for it. Our minds most certainly are not at this point. This is kind of like when it tells you in like the Bible, it says men's hearts failing them for what comes upon the earth. Well, I actually think on one level that's an extremely interesting way to describe it, because my sense is that I don't think most people are ready to process what we're even talking about here.
You're dead on, and I'll tell you, and this isn't macho, this isn't arrogance or anything extreme over the top, but I don't care how tough someone is, how much combat training they've had, the whole 9 yards. When you see something just step right out of the air in front of you that defies description, and you empty about 4 magazines into it, and it looks at you and swats you backwards like a fly, you will pee your pants. Been there, done that. Been there, done it. You will pee your pants. And then it's check time. Do I get up and find a way to get rid of it, or do I just run my butt off?
We've talked about some really dark stuff, and we've talked about some really good stuff, too. I mean, I think those people who have the wisdom to listen to this and go over to your blog and read with open eyes what you and Axe have been putting out on that blog on one level are probably prepared for it. I don't even care who hears this. I'm obviously, when I put shows up, I want them to be heard, but I've reached the place where I understand that I don't have a mainstream audience. I think the people who need to hear this will hear it, or they'll hear a message that they need to hear. It seems that Axe is kind of, well, Axe is your feminine side, obviously.
Right.
She's your intuitive side. She's the side of you that has kind of, I guess, to use a very bad term, soothed the beast on one level. You two are working through strategies for something that's huge. And what spiritually are your strategies for dealing with these things? Because you're basically, the way I see what we've talked about in this show, Duncan, we're talking about foreshadowings of things that are to come. We're the dark messengers that are saying, hey, look, however weird all this sounds, you better open your ears and your eyes up, and you better listen to what we're saying and at least consider it, or you are going to be blindsided by something huge. How are you preparing? What are you seeing? What are you doing to prepare yourselves beyond the obvious things that you've done in terms of training, survival, and things like that?
You know, we were talking about that we were on the phone till almost 2 a.m. this morning, my time. We do that about twice a week. And that's one of the things that we ask ourselves all the time. Are we on the right track? And I've always said, well, we haven't jumped it yet, so we're still running. So we have dealt with everything that you and I have discussed on the interviews for so many years. Mm-hmm. It's second nature to us. I mean, we really, honestly, we don't know any different. We don't know what a night's sleep is without something after us, or seeing, opening our eyes and seeing things standing there in the room, or we don't know we don't know anything different. Mm-hmm. I guess the best way I can say the way we're preparing is just by doing what we've always done. Learn who our enemy is. A good trainer who has a fighter going in will get films of the guy's opponent, mm-hmm. pictures, stills, mm-hmm. interviews, learn everything he can about the guy that he's going to fight. Well, that's what I say everybody else needs to do. Learn everything about your enemy that you can. And this is an old cliche to say that fear is your worst enemy, and that is very true to the greatest extent. That's where Axe said in the blog post last night, a clear mind, a clear head is your greatest asset, is your greatest weapon, and she's absolutely right about that. But you're going to see things that are absolutely going to make you pee your pants. And that's not grandiosing, that's just the truth. And there is no real way to prepare for something like that at this stage of the game. Axe and I were put through seeing things like that from childhood.
Yeah.
From the time we were small. So, like I said, we don't know anything different. But for the people listening, learn to calm yourself as much as possible. I mean, on the physical side, okay, let's do a series of interviews with Axe, you, me, and Axe.
Okay.
And we'll try to expand on this.
Yeah.
Step one, physical side. Old Japanese training method. Get in the shower, turn the water warm. Gradually turn the water colder until it's ice cold. Control your breathing, control your emotions until you stop shivering. Your heartbeat slows back down to normal, and you can just stand there quietly, calmly, with ice-cold water spraying down your back. As simplistic and as idiotic as this sounds, it's step one. It's level one to controlling your fear. You have to be able to control yourself physically mm-hmm. to control yourself mm-hmm. emotionally.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think the discipline at the most basic level is what you build on. That to me seems like a simple exercise. It's also making me. I was hiking last weekend, and I'm in Pennsylvania. It's still quite cold here, and the mountains last weekend, the snow melted off, and we had big storms. I hiked up a mountain, and it's about a 3-mile trek up. It's not a real big mountain, but it's a pretty good hike. We had to wade through water continuously because the trails were underwater. And the first time you do that, it's kind of like I took my boots off the first time, and I went in barefoot, and it's like, oh. And after a couple of minutes, you walk back out on dry land, and you go, wow, that's right.
Exactly.
Wow, that's invigorating. And after a while, you go, you know what? I kind of like that.
Right. Exactly right. And then there's some mental exercises that we can go into later that she and I perform mm-hmm. Pretty routinely. It helps keep us focused, keep us sharp. Of course, then there's other exercises that she and I do that I don't think we can teach. It's just something that's literally inbred within us. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's what we call picting with each other, where we project images to each other, that kind of thing. But it's a start.
What you're talking about there is things that, I think maybe the more spiritually mature, and it'd be like a 0.5% or less of people that may hear this show, have to go into some other areas of understanding. Remote viewing, things like that, which is, not what it sounds like. It's basically channeling the subconscious and tapping into the parts of your brain you're not using because, excuse me, human, you're only using 10% of your brain right now. So
exactly.
These are the things that I don't know how you can't teach that in a short period of time. I think some wisdom you have to be led to.
I was talking to an Apache medicine man several years ago, and we were just sitting having a conversation, and I brought up some of the quote-unquote remote viewing teachers, whatnot. He sits there, and he snorts, and he said, they trying to tell us how to do something we've been doing for hundreds of years?
Well, actually, interestingly enough, if you look at it plain-faced for what it actually is, I can show you in the scriptures where the Old Testament prophets did it.
Yeah.
It is a natural... Yeah. People don't understand that there's a part of us that's been shut down. And
exactly.
We do not have all of the facilities we were born with, so we have to begin to redevelop them. And I do want to talk about this more, and that's something... I'm hoping to find people that can talk about it. But what you're talking about here, it sounds esoteric, it sounds occult. No, it's part of what has been shut off in us. It was part of our natural survival mechanism that basically was switched off by, well, I guess these same ruling elites that are screwing with us now.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Absolutely, pretty much. And somebody shot me a note saying to me that sounds like you're taking up for some of these families. One, heck no, And like I told Axe last night, I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, but I said I'd like to send them all to hell, but I can't do that. I'm not taking up for any of these guys, okay? I mean, in that personification of what's right and wrong, good and evil, these are the bad of the bad, but I let myself be put in a situation where now I have rules I have to follow.
And those rules probably are part of the discipline that you've got to follow now, because it's pretty clear that you made a choice, and I think the choice is kind of guided by the rules of the people who probably in some way are going to empower you and protect you too.
Well, they have in the past. Obviously, I should have been taken out many years ago. But when you've got someone as powerful as my godmother and a couple of other people that have always been part of my life, yeah, I admit it, they kept me alive, So in some respects, yeah, I owe them for a lot. But I looked at the situation from all three sides. I weighed it. I thought about it for a couple of years, actually. This was not a decision that I had to make overnight. I had several years to make this decision. They just wanted their answer that night because they were tired of waiting on me, okay? And I kept seeing and thinking and getting all this other information and whatnot, and it's beyond accepting the lesser of two evils, okay? The group that I'm in isn't evil. We just are. And our goal and our job and our assignment, our mission is to protect, teach, and save as many people as possible. When the two families forget about the rules and just let it all go. Just the final battle when they just turn it loose. That's what that's our job, is to save and protect and save as many as we can.
And your decision was basically summarized in what you put up on the blog. And I got to tell you, when I read it again, I got chills. Humanity is worth fighting for.
It is. I get emails from people every day. It makes me think, no, not.
I know. I understand that. Yeah. The bottom feeders. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I do too.
But when I stood there, and again, you always have a protagonist. You always have, it's almost like a courtroom. You have one side arguing for, one side arguing against, so there's no mistake. When you stand there and make your decision, there's no mistake. You cannot say 2 years down the line, I didn't have this information. Yeah, you do. Because you're standing right there with one side trying to convince you and the other side trying to not convince you. So you've got the information when you make that decision. So I'm standing there in front of all these people. Any one of them could buy and sell a small island. And I told the protagonist, I disagree. honorable sir, I think the human race is worth saving. They deserve the chance to grow and learn. I'm like, where did that come from? And that's when I made my decision.
Where that came from was the higher being that's inside you. It's the same being that fought for survival during the years when you were part of the projects, and it's the same being that snapped out of that MRI machine and began to reintegrate personalities that were going to tear you apart. That's what I see.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. And like I said, I had basically made my decision over 3 years ago. I knew where I was going to go. I knew exactly what side I was going to choose. I also knew the consequences.
Well, we all have consequences, don't we? Good answer.
I don't do good following rules, okay? But I've got rules I have to follow now. I have guidelines. I have a whole rule book that says, oh, can't do that, can't say that. But I just want to bitch slap this guy in the next week. You can't do that. You know, okay. So it's like, you know, do what we can do with what we have to do with.
Well, I suspect that the rules are there to harness the power, because you can't let it all out at once.
No, absolutely not. And, you know, it's a situation where a car could pick me up anytime, day or night. I could be taken to the airport and flown anywhere and take a team in and they say, destroy this warehouse. Right? No problem. Because what we find in that warehouse is some stuff that shouldn't be there.
Uh-huh.
Or it could be something as simple as get in your car and go to this address. Someone is there. Comfort them. That's it. Just sit and talk to them. Okay. Don't get that, but all right, I'm away. And it could be as complicated as going in front of a council meeting and giving testimony that one side broke the rules and watching all hell break loose. That was fun. I'm going to tell you right now, that was fun.
So on the one hand, you're a witness, and on the other hand, you're kind of the protagonist, too. That's an interesting thing.
I'm kind of the prosecutor, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of the prosecutor. And there's some people don't like that.
I understand why, too, because I think they're up against something they don't completely understand, which I think is the point of it all. These people think they've had it. They think they've had it figured out for a long time, but there's an X factor in all of this. And
well, yeah, and even the quote unquote Illuminati families that most people think are the ones actually, you know, driving the car. Most of these guys are so blinded by greed and the need and the want for power, and a lot of the older family members are demonicos or worse. Very few of them actually know the circumstances and the future complications of their decisions, but they will learn.
It's a battle physically, it's a battle spiritually. And Duncan, you've been real generous with your time. This is pretty raw, and I like it that way. I like the conversation we had. I would love very much to be able to get another conversation or two, and hopefully with Axe as well, and talk about some of the things that we didn't talk about here. That's, of course, your call and your timing.
I will be speaking with her tonight, and we'll see if we can't set something up. I know she wants to. I know she has no problem with it.
Well, we'll put it together. I mean, we got no problem.
Okay.
If we got to connect phone lines, we'll do that. And you know, what I'm looking for is for you to put out whatever you want to say. This platform, however humble it is yours and Axe's as well, to put out information that hopefully we can seed out, and the few people out there that are going to hear this, that can glean from it, are going to be people that get armed in some way, because I know that this information is important. I sense it. I sense that the timing of us talking today was something that was important. And
I agree.
You've been generous, and I'm going to end the interview here by just saying I deeply appreciate you taking the time to talk to me and to the listeners out there and putting out what you put out.
We very much appreciate you, my friend, so we will definitely be doing this again.
And that wraps up this episode of Exotica, Conversation with Duncan O'Finioan. We're going to do several more interviews. Duncan and Axe are going to come on, and we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the things that were alluded to or talked about in this interview. We're going to go a little bit deeper into some strategies for survival. And I want to thank Duncan again for coming on, and I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to this. One final note. It is not my attempt to, in any way, disparage those who are trying to get legitimate information out. I have questions about those who come on to the internet as insiders and present information, and I've not spent a whole lot of time discoursing on any of the forums over the Charles material.